Hello, everyone, and we are back with the new episodes of the podcast series When Machine Learning Meets Data Privacy. I'm your host, Fabiana, and now that we had time to say goodbye to 2020, it's time to think about 2021. So today, I've decided to bring you here Federated Learning. This is a new topic and also a paradigm for many data scientists. Federated learning brings machine learning models to the source, rather than bringing the data to the model. What are the benefits of this decentralized system? And what are the applications for this type of technology? And maybe, what does the future hold for federated learning? To help us unveiling some of these questions, I've invited Ramen Dutta, founder of TensoAI. Raman, you are a very experienced person in the area of machine learning, and you also have been dealing with a lot of questions around federated learning. Can you please walk us through a bit your experience? How have you started working in AI, and what led you to federated learning in the end?
I went to school back in a long time ago in agriculture engineering. Back then, after I did that, I started a company where it was a small computer software company where we did consulting for small to medium sized businesses. And it's just because back then it was the era of, kind of moving everything into the cloud system, and I was helping small to medium sized companies do that. But it really wasn't my passion, and what my passion was agriculture. And so I started building a small little system in my basement where I could test out pushing hydroponic plants as close as possible together and trying to increase the amount of harvest that's available for such a small area and using special types of techniques, right? I found that if anybody knows agriculture and hydroponics, it was very difficult. My reservoir temperatures were going over the roof, and I needed to be there all the time. And so I started, I really wanted to go on vacation. So I started building the system where I could automate it all. And that's how my first company was born, which was Motorleaf. And as we were going through funding, we found that our biggest value prop was actually giving insights through the data that's already established in large greenhouses. And that's how I started with AI, and then finding, what can that data do for not only the greenhouse, but for all of us, right?
Definitely, that's a different way to start in the area of AI. To be honest, I think I never heard a description like that. Okay, starting with an agricultural perspective and understanding. Okay, and data can be like very important in this area. That's unique. What are you currently doing then in TensoAI? I understood that you reached out moderately if you understand that data was really the big benefit and the big value of your proposition. So what led you to TensoAI?
When I was working Murder Leaf, we found that the data migration, the data security, and everything that goes around migrating that data over to our servers, like the legal aspect, the cloud infrastructure, the backups, GDPR was a huge part, was a large hindrance on the clients to jump on. It increased the acquisition cost to get that customer, which forced a higher price point for the customer, and it was like a vicious circle that kept on going around, and we couldn't break out of it. Then I was on the hunt for a software or an infrastructure that would allow us to easily push over the models over to the data and run it there, which would get rid of all these hindrances in getting our clients to jump on board, and really puts data privacy at the forefront. Seeing this, we were able to understand that the data could be secured, the models could run over into the data source, and we were able to speed up development and getting models out into production at a quicker rate. That's what really got me into federated learning. Like it's definitely a need out there, and it's a niche need, but it's just coming to the forefront now, where data privacy is really coming into people's minds, right?
Completely, completely. And being already in the topic around, okay, how federated learning can be important for privacy, for many of us that are data scientists and we are not yet aware of the potential of this privacy enhancing technologies, What is, in your perspective, or if you could explain what is federated learning in like a party for a bunch of people that are not experts in the data area, how would you tell them what is federated learning?
That's I love that question because I find it's a very loaded question, you know. Everybody has their own view of federated learning, but for us at Tenso, it's basically to push our models over to the data source where it's safe and secure in a safe and secure manner. Having it secured down at the application level makes it very interesting because at that point we're able to control it all. And we're able to control the fact that the data needs to be secured down and the raw data can't be shown. So for us, federated learning is a way that we can improve AI development without giving out the secret sauce. As an example, I deal with a lot of greenhouses, and their data is what makes them so successful. It could always be backwards engineered into a process to create those plants. So a lot of greenhouses keep this very secret, and they don't want to share that to AI companies where they don't know where it could go.
And that's a very, different insight and the perspective that data can tell a lot from a business. That seems a big advantage of using federated learning. Okay, and let's say that I have federated learning and I have other privacy enhancing technologies like differential privacy or even encryption. So, for you, what is the main advantage that federated learning brings that the others cannot deliver?
The main advantage that we see is as like the biggest adopters of why greenhouses want to join us is right now is the GDPR and the compliance regulations that are out there. A lot of the problems that we're seeing is that companies don't even want to deal with that aspect of their data. And so they're willing to just, hey, let's just keep it in house and not share it out and not pass it along to AI companies so that they'll be secured in knowing that their information is not being passed around, isn't going anywhere else.
In a way, it's that sense that models can be trained where the data is and not having the data to be transported where the models are trained. Is
Exactly.
that okay? Okay, that's
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what we take away from federated learning, as our biggest value proposition. Nobody likes data migration. Nobody likes pulling data onto a large server. As far as a CTO perspective, you're dealing with not only the storage costs, you're dealing with the compute costs, you're dealing with backing it up to make sure that that data isn't lost or passed along to somebody else, the security around that. And so it just makes it easier for companies all around. And it's just a matter of changing the mindset of a lot of these decision makers to see the advantage of it, right?
True. And having that in mind and knowing that the models will, in the end, run where the data is, for training federated learning models, is there any specific requirements in terms of, I don't know, hardware or software already installed in the customers they have to be prepared to have in order to have these models trained? Or is there this benefit where you can train these models in a much smaller amount of data, so you don't have to invest prior in like big hardware and big infrastructure to have the models trained?
So I think you caught on one really interesting point there is like compute power. Bringing all your data over to one server and running your models off of there. It's a large resource cost in the cloud service. Having privatized data and running it at the source creates less of a hindrance on these large server farms. So, as an example, I think Gmail came up with a great federated learning application where they're able to kind of finish the sentence on your emails. Obviously, that algorithm isn't being run on a server where your sentences are being pushed onto a server, but it's actually being run on your phone. And in that way, all that compute power is being used from your phone and not being used on a big server somewhere where it's taking large resources from the environment. I think this idle compute power that we have in our phones and that's everywhere is going to be very valuable in the next upcoming years because it's something that's untapped right now. And if we're able to utilize that, I think that's going to be a big game changer.
Speaking about game changing applications for this kind of technology, and One thing that always pops up in the industry is this kind of a trend where, okay, let's collect as much data as possible. And well, let's assume that is true. In some countries, it is not possible at all to have the data physically moved from to other geographies. Like you have the example of Germany, you have also the example of Turkey, for example. Do you think that federated learning could definitely bring a main advantage for these cases where data has to be stored locally, cannot be moved, but you no longer have that limitation where you have to have all your infrastructure based in a specific geography in order to cope with legal aspects?
That is a big game changer. And I think this is it's the start of this road to the death of big data. Obviously, big data has its use cases and its need in different applications. But as far as agriculture goes, there's been a large push over the past 8 to 10 years to collect all this data in one centralized place. We have companies called like Open Ag Coalition that's trying to get everybody's data together. We have different organizations that are doing this, but now with federated learning, we're seeing that we don't need that. If we reduce that big data, we're reducing the server storage, we're reducing the compute power, we're reducing the carbon footprint on our environment, to tell you the truth. And it's not something that we really think about, but those large farms, they create a very, very big environmental cost, not only in the infrastructure in the beginning to build it, but then in the maintenance cost. That's why these countries like Germany and Turkey that are making these bold moves are actually doing these bold moves for the environment. If anything, I could only applaud that, and I'm hoping that that kind of mentality moves over, to strengthen up the GDPR in the UK, and it moves over in a more global aspect so that everybody understands what's going on with their private data and understands how important it is to keep it private.
And that was a very bold statement, like the death of big data. No,
I
it's very
know.
that it sounds like cyclical. Like we had this movement all around big data and all getting all the data in the same space, and now we are seeing again a kind of decentralized trend, which leads me to the next question, in fact, which is a bit related with the data scientists, right? So these guys that do the analysis on the data, they are like so used to do all the analysis on all the data they can get. How do you think that federated learning, how much in the next years can change the day to day of a data scientist?
There's so much misconception around federated learning, and right away it's shrugged off as just another coined term. So I feel like as a lot of data scientists are not really looking at it right now because they're so focused on what they've already done to develop. Like it takes so much work to develop a model, development training, validating. It's kind of endless. And when you think you're done, you sometimes you have to go back a couple of steps, right? So I think it's very, very difficult for data scientists to rethink the structures of their model, the infrastructure of their model, because of this idea that, hey, I needed to collect as much data as I can to kind of come up with my analysis and my thoughts. Yeah, it's difficult for them to go back into the drawing board and say, okay, well, maybe the infrastructure is wrong, maybe the access to data is wrong. I guess talking to a lot of data scientists over the past few years, I found that they're absorbing loads and loads of data in this unstructured, maybe even Excel manner. It creates confusion and like almost like a misunderstanding of the data if you have like a large group of data scientists all trying to give in their inputs, right? So I think federated learning is going to play a key role because the libraries that we use, like the privacy preserving libraries and tools that we use, kind of does a lot of the statistical analysis for you. Because we can't pull the raw data out, we're getting a statistical analysis of it, which kind of does half of the job for them, for data scientists, where they're able to get the information without having to fiddle around with the numbers. Fiddling around with the numbers creates different misconceptions from different data scientists, which creates confusion. That's what I found. And so if we trust those tools, if we trust the libraries that are going to preserve the privacy, then that's half of the steps already taken for them. I find it funny. There's a similarity between data scientists and growers in greenhouses. A lot of the growers, a lot of their job is just to make sure that there's harvest because the harvest is is what's going to create the monetary cycle that they need for the company. They've been doing it a certain way that they know it works. And for AI companies to come in and say, hey, have you tried doing this and this and this? We're right away shrugged off because they don't want to go back to the drawing board. And nobody wants to go back to the drawing board. So yeah, I find it funny, this vertical I'm in, because I see similarities between different types of people everywhere. So
I guess it's always hard to change your habits. Once you get used to something, it's very hard. No, but it's a very interesting comparison, definitely. In your perspective, in knowing as much as difficult it can be for someone that already does something in a certain way, in this particular case, let's assume the data scientist, what are the skills that might be required for an organization to successfully adopt federated learning?
for model development, I've always found that there's two main things that you need, is high quality data and talented data scientists. Everybody in the world right now is looking for those talented data scientists that can think outside of that box. Since federated learning is just kind of moving outside of the development phase into the real life productions, being able to adapt to those new data sets and quickly validate and release is going to be the tipping point for a lot of those AI companies across different industries. And so to me, it's really talent and really being able to think outside of the box. And if there's companies like YData and Tenso that are dealing with the issue of high quality data, all data scientists really need to think about is the model development. What specific skills is hard to say, but it's being able to think outside the box and really being able to come up with solutions that nobody else has been able to really think of. And that comes down to the people, right? And I know that a lot of data scientists are autodidactic. They're learning on their own. They might have done courses, but a lot of them are learning on their own and finding new techniques by having conversations with other data scientists, joining those discussion groups. And obviously, MLOps is a huge one, and it's just a matter of communicating.
Exactly. And definitely communities play a big role on that, like Open Mind, MLOps, and others, definitely. I will get back a bit again to one of the aspects related, more technical aspect related with federated learning that always pops up in any discussion, which is if I don't have access to the data, and how do I debug my model? How do I know what have influenced in certain way certain models? I've seen some solutions around synthesizing data and having just access to the synthetic data. There are other a lot of methods, and a lot of people think this is a crucial point on federated learning, especially if we have to, for some reason, give some explanation about the model. What do you think about this? Do you think this is even a problem or shouldn't?
It is a problem. A lot of greenhouses want to know why. A lot of data scientists want to know why. And so, I think I touched a little bit about having trust between the libraries and the tools and the data scientists. Like that link is going to be very important. It's a matter of the data scientists understanding what the libraries are doing to create that trust. It's a change of thought for the data scientists to say, okay, I could get a lot of different information from statistical analysis. I don't need to look at the raw data, but I can look at different aspects of how the data is pulled together. So I think there's one great example where if there's a room of people and you want to know who's lying and who's not lying, you would ask them to flip a coin. But you would say, hey, listen, if you have heads, tell me it's heads. If you don't have heads, it's tails. Well, flip it again. And if it's tails, lie to me. If it's heads, tell me the truth, right? And then with that information, you're able to understand what the proportion of people that are lying and which are the proportion that are telling the truth. And that's the kind of information that we're getting from these tools and these models that could create these amazing, amazing AI developments. The information is there. It's just a matter of finding a new way to get to it, right?
Exactly. So it only changes basically the way it is given to the people that is doing the analysis, but you still have access to the information that is really important, at least to justify the results of the models and other aspects of the AI development, right?
And I think it's not only, like differential privacy, but it's using all those tools together. Like using synthetic data could very much validate your the models that you're running, or that the way that you're thinking about developing those models. And it's a matter of leveraging all these tools together to make sure that you have a production level model that will run universally across greenhouses. So it's important.
And this is a bit more of again, a jump in the future question. And specifically, we have this application of federated learning to greenhouses. In your opinion, which direction can federated learning evolve from here? So, how much room for evolution do we have here? And in your perspective, from 10 years from now, where it will be technologies or things like federated learning? 10 years might be too much, but let's say in a 5 years' time.
Yeah, 10 years is a pretty long time, and we have to always be thinking that. And I think one of these mentors that I was talking to was like, your job as a founder is to see 5 years into the future and know there's going to be. Unfortunately, I think federated learning could evolve. I think that's the whole reason this whole technology got brought into the open world, because nobody really knows what's going to evolve, and that's really going to be determined by the industries that uptake it and their push for privacy, right? Personally, I'd like to see like a full reversal on cloud computing, like so we're not storing our data into the cloud, reducing that overhead. And so hopefully we could reduce our carbon footprint in the environment that way if we could reduce that data storage. And I think that's the first step to not only dealing with privacy, dealing with the environment too. It just encapsulates it all. Ultimately, like the real need is going to be pushed from the consumer side. We need to make privacy kind of seamless for the consumer, where they're not constantly being asked if they want to share their data, but it's all done at the company level. It should never be at the consumer's responsibility to understand these legal complexities to data communications between the systems, when the people that are writing it are the experts, right? Those system developers are the experts. They just need to use those tools properly so that consumer doesn't know what's going on, but yet knows that their data is secure.
For us there that we are in technology, sometimes privacy can already be a bit of a daunting topic. I cannot imagine for the consumers how hard it can be to incorporate all these topics together, privacy, technology, how systems communicate. So yeah, a very interesting way of seeing this in the application of the technology.
But what's and if we talk about greenhouses specifically, a lot of these growers and these greenhouses are so focused on creating the best crop, creating the revenues, because it's a pretty cutthroat industry, and they don't have time to think about what's happening with their data. They just want to know that it's secure, and that companies like Tenso are responsible for them, and that they know that it's not being moved around. So, but they still need the benefits of AI so to further the company along. So it's really a win-win situation for everybody if they were able to adopt federated learning and adopt companies like Tenso. So
And I feel like that is true for a lot of different industries that are not, let's say, tech based, that need to be concerned around their main product and their main solutions, let's say.
that's their bread and butter. That's what that if you put a monetary value on it, right? That's their whole company right there. So scary. You had an interesting point, of where will federated learning go from here? How it will be done. I think there's certain industries that are really going to take hold of it. The medical industry is a huge one. We have companies like Okin that does federated learning on medical data, and because of this pandemic that we're going through, drug discovery is really being accelerated, and we should have an infrastructure in place, to kind of better place our models between the private data and the government data. So yeah, I'm keeping my eye on companies like Okin, see how they progress in the future, because I think they're going to be really setting the precedence on what privacy means.
Yes, for sure. And especially on a healthcare, such a regulated space. I'm also very interested in understanding how this will evolve at that level, for sure. We have already touched a lot of different interesting points from how this can mean that big data is seeing the end of the days, or even how data scientists are so similar to the growers in greenhouses. But I'm also keen in understanding and listening a bit of your experience. Here in the podcast, we have this section, the open mic, where we always ask our guests to share a view, an idea, or an interesting experience. And yourself, as very experienced professional in the area of technology and how embed technology in agriculture, and also as an entrepreneur and founder, what would you like to share with us?
As a founder, entrepreneur, everything takes time, right? And planning and everything is constantly changing, and it's just a matter of adapting. As far as agriculture goes, I really have a passion for agriculture, and I love what we're trying to do at a global scale, so that we have food security at a local level and on a global level, but and making sure that the environment is sustainable at the same time. So from that aspect, agriculture is definitely slow, and people that are in agriculture and AI kind of understand how greenhouses and how farmers are very slow to react, and it's difficult for them to kind of pick up new technologies. And the only thing I would love to just kind of say out is just like the proof is what's really, really important now as far as agriculture and AI go. I think there's been a lot of startups and a lot of companies that have been kind of saying what they could do without the proof. And now there's, I guess, a mentality around agriculture where you really have to prove what you're doing before anything is adopted or anything is kind of put in, because, these farmers, these people just don't have time. And I don't know if that's common around all the other industries, that they're more accepting to new technologies, but yeah, agriculture's slow.
How hard is to prove that point to them? I guess that agriculture and technology, in specific, I won't say technology, I will say rather AI, it's a kind of different worlds. So, how hard is to explain them and to show them the benefits of this?
It's quite difficult. The way that we're doing it in Tenso is that we want to get the trust of the system vendors. So as an example, in a greenhouse, you have different types of vendors, like the controller system that has the sensors that pick up the sensor data. You have plant vision that has a camera that's looking at all your plants to tell you if there's any kind of deficiencies. What we're doing is going through the vendors, because there is that trust already with the greenhouse, to allow for us to easily show our value in a non-intrusive way. As an example, we have a little device that we throw onto the local network that will be able to run those models whenever we want. And so with this device, it doesn't stop any kind of operation, it doesn't slow them down at all, but we're able to run our models in the background and then show them the value prop when we're ready. And they understand that the AI development takes time, and we understand that, hey, we don't want to mess anything up on the greenhouse side, because that's the food that people are eating, and if they can't eat, well, there's a problem, right? So I think there's a really big importance of trust. I think we've talked about trust between the data scientists and the libraries, and now there's a trust issue between AI companies and greenhouses in reference to agriculture. So it's interesting. Definitely a lot of
Oh, nice.
challenges.
Haman, from our side, this has been like an amazing episode specifically on the real world application of federated learning to a vertical that is, to be honest, is kind of surprising that sometimes we don't see that many times covered around how agriculture is adopting new technologies, and specifically AI. So it has been very interesting and a very different perspective from, let's say, the most traditional industries that you we usually heard of AI being applied to. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I love talking about this. So if anybody wants to reach out, please, there's a chat on the website, tensoai.com. Send us an email. We'll get you into our discussion groups with our other data scientists, and we're always talking about new and exciting use cases and projects that are coming up. So get in touch.
I think you are also around the open mind community, right?
Hmm.
So I think that if anyone wants to join that community and ping ramen, that probably will be more than welcome.
Exactly. It'll be great.
Thank you, Haman.
Thanks so much.